I have nothing but gratitude for this year, because if I didn't reset that, if I didn't let go of those things, if I didn't move forward in the right direction on the right path, I would be way further behind. Welcome to the Legacy Creator Podcast, a show dedicated to giving you the tools you need to build a profitable, purposeful, and powerful business that lasts. I'm your host, Ashton Smith. I'm a sixth-generation entrepreneur who is passionate about helping you think bigger so that you can actualize your goals and build your legacy. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Legacy Creator Podcast. Today is going to be such a cozy, fun episode. We literally brought the cozy intention with your sweater.
Sweater vibes.
And my flannel. I've got leggings on that you can't see because they're not really cute with my outfit. But, you know, we've got our coffees. And this episode's going to be, it's going to have like the same conversational tone that we always bring, but it's going to be less like action items, like big takeaways that you should act on, and more so like powerful reflection, and kind of like you get to be a fly on the wall to see like some of what we went through this year, like behind the scenes, the real stuff. You know what I'm saying?
The real stuff, the real tea.
So we want to open up kind of like our journal or whatever and just share a little bit about this year. And I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Woo woo.
Let's get into it.
Let's do it. Okay, so what we do to start every single year is around Christmas time, we get together as a family and we sit in my parents' living room and we share our words for the year. And it's like my favorite thing ever. It's like my favorite. I'm already vision casting for my word for next year. And I'm already just excited to sit around the living room and just talk about the last year and talk about what's upcoming. And so we select words for the year, and that's kind of like our anthem and our theme for the entire like upcoming 365 days. And so what we wanted to do is kind of start by sharing like what were our words for this year and what did it look like to live that out. So my word was steadfast.
My word was trailblaze.
And I still remember like when we got together and we talked about these words last year, I think we went to Sola Coffee.
Yeah, we met for like a team meeting, team co-working day.
But we got together, we went to get coffee, and we were just doing some kind of reflection and vision casting just like we do every single year. And we shared our words, and I just remember we were both a little bit shocked by our own individual words as well as each other's. Like I was shocked by selecting steadfast as my word because usually my words are very like bold embodiment, like innovate. I don't know why I can't think of them. I'm blanking right now, but they're like big, like powerhouse words, expand, breakthrough. And so steadfast, I kept feeling like so drawn to that concept. That's usually what happens. People always ask me like, okay, how do you go about selecting your word? And I think for us, part of it is like this spiritual practice, like there's prayer involved, but it's also just like noticing what are we feeling drawn to? Like what is like tugging on our heart? And that's why sometimes to me, like it can be surprising. It's like, ooh, like that's my word for the year. You know, I'm not going to go for a powerhouse word this year. So I was surprised by steadfast. When Jordan shared her word, trailblaze, I was shocked as well because that is such a powerhouse word.
Yeah. And it's so funny because like we were kind of opposites. Like your words have always been very like big and like just like go-getter kind of words. But in the past few years before now, my words were always like very pretty and nice sounding words. You know, it was like bloom one year. I think flourish maybe was another one. I can't remember.
Evergreen?
I don't think evergreen was a word. I think it was like rebirth was one year, and green was kind of my color for that year, which was like, I don't know why I picked a color, but I felt really drawn to green at that time, and also kind of went with rebirth and whatever. But I was doing this like research kind of on my own. I was already thinking about it and I was like, what is my word gonna be? Like, I have no idea what I even feel like needs to be my word. And through some of my like researching, I mean, I was just looking through like different lists of words. I was looking up different, I don't even know like how I came across the word trailblaze, but as soon as I saw it, it was like a gut feeling that I was like, oh, this is my word. And I was like kind of scared by it because I was like, I've never had a word be so like action oriented and so like intense. And I was like, I was scared by it. But that was part of the reason why I felt like it was right. Because I was like, I wouldn't pick this word. Like if I really didn't want to pick this word, I didn't have to. But I was like, this feels right. So I'm just going to like go with that. And that's how it happened.
Yeah, I feel like you just experience and feel like this alignment, even though sometimes the word can scare you or it can be surprising, you just somehow know that like this is it. Like this is what I am feeling called to over this next year. And it is always so comical, like how these words play out in your life and like in the business. So for me, when I was originally thinking steadfast and I was feeling so drawn to that word, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to need to really just like keep pushing the pedal to the metal on what we're doing. I thought it meant we're not going to add necessarily new things into the mix this year, but we're just going to stay the course. We're going to stay the course with the things that we're doing. And like, that's going to be fulfilling and rewarding and amazing. And like, yes, I think that that's one interpretation of steadfast, but I swear on my life, every single year, it like, it always happens to where the word never plays out.
Yeah.
The way that you think it will.
Yeah. Cause you have your idea of what it's going to look like, but you don't know what's going to happen and you don't know how that's going to play out. And it's always different than what you think it's going to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember the year I chose the word breakthrough as my word for the year. Oh my God. I was like, yeah, we're going to experience breakthrough. It's going to be magical. I'm going to be on that freaking mountaintop and I'm going to have my hands in the air. It's going to be amazing. And then for like 8 months of that year, it was crap. It was so hard. And like when I look back, I always use this metaphor. I'm like, literally, in order to experience that breakthrough, to get to that side where it's like so rewarding, you literally, if you envision a flower, it has to break through, like bust through the dirt before it can rise up and bloom. And like, that was my experience with breakthrough. Well, steadfast was no different. Who's surprised? So I will just like forewarn you, if you do this practice, like just beware, like
beware.
No one knows what's going to happen, but it's going to be good. So steadfast, really what that looked like this year was, I just got a picture in my mind of me like on a boat, but it's like pouring and storming and like the boat's rocking from side to side. And I'm just like holding on to the side of the boat, trying not to fall off. But really it was like, okay, I've got to like lead and steer this ship and I have to stay the course. And we've got to, like, no matter how bad the storm gets and no matter how painful it is, like I have to stay the course and I have to keep my head down. I have to stay focused. And it was hard. Like this year was so hard. And for the first, like, I would say the first 6 months to 7 months of this year, like I was going through some stuff behind the scenes and it was like really painful and really hard. And steadfast was like, that was the word, the theme that kept me going. I was like, okay, even though this is hard, like I have to get up and I have to keep moving. And yes, I had to pace myself and yes, I needed breaks, but it was so much harder, I think, than I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm. Man, that is so true. I felt like you were just having to be steady throughout like a storm, like in the personal side of things, but also I think, you know, with some of the business stuff, I felt like I was just like, let's do this and let's do this. And you were just like, okay, like you were like steady throughout it all. So, and that's not always easy. Being steady throughout a storm, like a literal storm, that's not easy.
No. And like, I feel like you can feel so alone in that if you just like create that image in your mind of like, you know, you're in a storm, you're steering a ship, like you're trying to make sure everyone's good and that you're good and that you're moving forward and you're in the right direction. Like it's really like lonely. And I feel like I felt that a lot this year too. So yeah, it was really tough, but I feel like for me at least, once I got over the hump of like the first 6 to 7 months of this year, I really started to like shift gears. And I won't get ahead of myself, but I just think 2024 is going to be really powerful because of that and because of what I had to go through this year. And, you know, maybe I'll shed a little more light on that here in a moment. But I want to talk about how complimentary your word was. And it just was so beautiful how it worked out because, you know, even at the start, we knew our words were like opposites and that they would be a beautiful compliment to one another. But I don't think I knew like how much I would need Jordan's like trailblazing energy this year because I didn't know how hard this year was going to be for me. And so Jordan, like, she has just been on fire this year. And I think that you like watching or listening to this, like you can see that and you can feel that because Jordan, you've like come to the front like in so many different ways this year. And like you come into your own in so many ways, but man, you guys, like I can't tell you how much I needed you to like be operating in that energy and for that to be like your call this year because I didn't have it for like months and months. Like there were days where I'd wake up and I was like, I just want to go back to sleep. Like I don't feel like any compulsion to get up and do anything.
And you're not really like wired like that. I feel like you're more so wired like, let's get up and let's go. Like for the most part, you're like, you know, let's just do it. Let's get to work like every day. But yeah, I feel like it just worked out so beautifully. Like you can't plan this. You cannot plan this because you had no idea that like what steadfast would mean for you. And you also had no idea that like you would need my sort of like trailblazing energy. And I didn't know that like how that would work out so well together. But yeah, I mean, going into the year, I thought trailblaze for me, like initially I thought it was going to be me like carving out like a new path for myself. Cause one of my big goals for the year was to write more. And I started, you know, I shared a couple like little pieces that I put together on my Instagram and then like totally fell off with that. Totally did not take it seriously. Hopefully in 2024, I can really like get on that because I love writing. But yeah, going into the new year, I was like, trailblaze, like that means like I'm carving out like my new path. I'm going to be doing something on my own. I'm going to start writing and like it could be like a blog kind of thing. Like I just felt like that was the vibe. Like I felt like that's where I was going. But then it started to shift. I feel like around February actually, which was pretty early into the year, I just started to realize that like maybe it was more so about work stuff and in my work life because February, I mean, I might have been thinking about this in January, but I know for a fact that February was when I was like, we need to do a podcast. I had written, like, I found these like old Google Docs that I write down my whole brain dump of like why I think this is a good idea, why we need to change from like vlog format on YouTube to a video podcast and how we can repurpose it. And I put together this whole like pitch for that and sent it to you because I was like, I feel so confident in this decision that we need to do this and it needs to happen right now. We don't need to wait because we had talked about doing a podcast eventually. You had for sure thought about it and was like, yeah, that'll be something we do at some point. But I was like, no, we need to do it now. And I remember feeling like not pushback from you in a way that was like, no, we don't need to do this, but more so like you were hesitant. And I was like, I literally have like a whole Google Doc of all the points of like why this is a good idea. But I also saw this section where it was like, if you want to stick with vlog format and we want to do that, this is what we need to do differently with vlogs. Like I had everything mapped out and if anyone of y'all know me that are listening, like I've never really been I feel like I've never been this sort of like personality. Like I've always been like very creative and like, you know, airy, whimsical, like that's my vibe. But I was just like, we need to do this. Like it needs to happen. We need to get on this podcast. We need to start doing it. And we don't even like, we hadn't figured everything out yet, but I was like, this is happening. Like, let's freaking do it. We started the podcast. I think we launched it in April. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, so confident that was, you know, the right move. And I was like, let's freaking do it. And it just worked out so perfectly, specifically in that scenario, because I don't know, you were like, you had your own little doubts about like, maybe we shouldn't do this yet. Or like, I don't know, I really love vlog format, so I just don't know about it. But I was just like,
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like, let's go. Like, hammer. Like, that. I was just a freaking hammer.
Let's freaking go. That's just Jordan's mantra from this year. Let's freaking go. Yeah. And I mean, the podcast was probably one of the biggest and like one of the first things I think you took initiative on to pitch to me. I think that you take initiative in your role and you always have, but in terms of pitching something new that you felt an urgency for, the podcast was really the first thing.
Yeah.
And it has ended up being the best decision for us. And there's so many reasons for that. We're really excited about season 2 and what's to come. But that energy kind of like trickled into so many other things. Our brand, our messaging, how we were showing up online, what we were measuring from like a data perspective and like making informed decisions and next steps with our marketing. Like these are all things that you took initiative on that usually I would be on top of, but like there was a time span this year where I just didn't have the mental energy and I definitely didn't have the inspiration and the motivation. Not that I usually build my business off of that, but like you said, I'm usually wired to be really energetic and a go-getter and inspired by what we're doing. But there was just a time frame this year where I didn't have that. And so you jumping into that role to take that initiative and to like see the vision and to like carve these new paths for us, like it was so invaluable. And like, I don't know where I would be without that.
Yeah, I remember feeling like, oh God, like this is kind of like not a good place that we're in right now because, well, not we, but like I remember hearing comments from you that like, you're like, I just don't want to do this. Or like when it came to work stuff, like we would be like just hanging out, like having family time, but you would be talking about work and you were like, I don't have it in me anymore. Like or not in general, but just like with certain things, I don't know. You were just like feeling kind of defeated or like, I just don't care. I don't have the energy for this. And I was like, okay, like I have to carry a little bit more weight with this stuff. And I feel like I already was naturally starting to, because I don't know why, but I just felt that urgency like with the podcast and whatever. But it worked out really perfectly because I didn't know and I didn't anticipate that you would really need that energy from me. I had no idea, but it worked out so well. I feel like our words and our whole like energy for the year like balanced each other out because you just were staying steady and staying the course. And I was like, let's freaking go, like carving out different paths and whatever.
Yeah.
But there was a good balance to it.
Yeah. I think about it like the best example I can think of is in a marriage, you're going to go through seasons where like one of you is going through a really rough time and the other has to like carry additional weight. And I think that translates over into teams and how you work together in the work environment. Obviously, our relationship is unique because we're sisters and friends. And so I think that you knew a lot of what was going on behind the scenes because of that. But I think people listening to this today, they'll be like, what? Like, I had no idea that you were going through so many things behind the scenes because of the way that we've showed up. And the only way that we could do that is mostly because of you and the systems and the workflows and the things that we work to get in place to bring that consistent energy so we can consistently serve through the business. But like you carried extra weight when I like could not.
Yeah.
It
just happened to work out perfectly like that. I definitely feel like this year I stepped into more responsibility just with my role here. Like, and it wasn't like you asked me to do more or something. Like it was just this natural thing. I started like doing more of my own research on things, learning more on my own time and really digging into strategy because you've always been very strategic minded and like this organized sort of person when it came to work stuff. And I've always been a bit more like sporadic, I guess. And I was just like, I want to look into strategy. Like, what can we be doing differently? And I started looking at numbers more. And like, I just started naturally doing that because I was like, there are some changes that I want to make. And like, I need to figure out how we need to get there, So,
Yeah.
I remember like specifically with the podcast, I remember when I pitched that to you and I was so freaking confident in that decision. I had done my research and I was just like, this is the best path forward for this. Like we'll be able to get really good, like video content and we'll be able to be on podcast platforms. Like we'll be able to repurpose and all of that jazz. And eventually down the line, I mean, maybe in like Q2 or Q3 or something, I don't really know, maybe midpoint of the year, I was like starting to feel really doubtful because I was like, what if this doesn't work out the way I thought it would? I was like, I rallied for this so hard. I was pitching this to Ashton. What if it like just totally tanks and like is the worst decision I ever made? And I started having thoughts like that, and I was like, because at once I was so confident in the decision, and then eventually I was like, oh my God, like I was the one who made this decision. Or like we definitely like worked through some things together, but I was the one that came to you and was like, this needs to be a thing. We need to do the podcast, da 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 da. This is why. And I was like, what if it doesn't work out? What if I made like the wrong decision? And I started kind of freaking out. I didn't like talk to you too much about that, but there were definitely moments where I felt like I talked to you and was just like, kind of just nervous and like doubtful. And I just remember you being so like steadfast. I don't know. So you were like just kind of trusting me. You were like, yeah, this is a good decision, and we're like doing this. And even if for some reason like the podcast is the worst decision we ever made, we'll be redirected to like where we need to be. You know what I mean? And just keeping that positive energy for me when I was feeling doubtful and I was having my own stuff.
Yeah,
So,
I feel like that is how you know that you are doing something right, when you experience that like vulnerability and fear of the creator. Like you are the creator and the artist and the strategist. You are taking the leap. You're betting on yourself, your ideas, what you're feeling compelled to do to create something and bring it to life. And then you have other people that are also betting on it as well. And you can feel the pressure of that. It is a vulnerable place to be in. And I talk about this all the time with our clients who are in the process of creating something, whether that is a new platform, it's a brand, it's an offer. There is this vulnerability that you feel and this pressure that you feel, because if you have passion tied to what you're building, like you want to see it succeed and you want to see people enjoy it. And I think you experienced that so many times this year because you put yourself out there in a lot of different ways. And like that can be so uncomfortable.
Yeah. And even tacking on to that, I had moments as well where I was just starting to doubt my own abilities as well. It wasn't just like doubting my decisions with like the podcast and stuff like that, but with like my graphics, for instance, I was just starting to compare my work to other people's, which I feel like for a long while I didn't really do that. Like I would look to people more so for inspiration and just to be like, man, their stuff's really good. But I started to get to this place where I was like, I feel like I suck. Like I am not doing well enough. Like I'm not doing a good enough job. I like this person over here is just like, I love their stuff. Why can't I create something like that? You know, I started getting really like that as well, just very in my head and just starting to doubt myself and my abilities. And I'm like, also just trying to remind myself that I'm on a journey. Like this isn't just eventually I'm going to be like the best graphic designer ever, or I'm going to be the best artist ever. It's like everyone's on their own journey. And I've just been trying to remind myself of that, especially within like maybe the past couple months at this point. Cause there was like one point in time, I just started going really downhill and starting to think really like negatively about certain things and just feeling like, man, I'm like not doing good enough, or I'm like, you know, I could be so much better than I am. And like, why is this person so good and I'm not? And yeah, it was just all this like doubt. And I was just like, what is this? But I felt like you were really a constant support. Not only are we sisters, but we work together. And even on like some of our meetings or whatever, our weekly meetings, I would just be like, no, like I would rant about some things and just be like, I suck, or like, I just feel like I could be so much better. And you were just like, Jordan, like you're good. Like, you're doing a great job, just being so like supportive and like calming my mind down instead of me like spiraling out of control about it. So yeah.
I feel like we were able to ebb and flow back and forth so well throughout this year because I think we both had our own moments of doubt and wondering and questioning. And I think like for me, it was less about the creative work and it was more about like just doubting me and my abilities as a leader and where we're going and what we're doing. And I think a lot of what I went through behind the scenes, a lot of that began in 2022. And I think that in 2022, it was like our best year in business. It was amazing and so much was happening. But once I got to 2023, it's like this switch flipped and I really started to realize that my motivations were so off. And I was operating so much from ego. Like ego was driving me in so many different ways. And I realized that I was pursuing things and following things and doing things and listening to people that I shouldn't be giving a place for in my life. I had to release like toxic relationships from my life that had like completely taken over. And I just felt completely burnt out and I was questioning myself. I was like, how did you put yourself in this position? And I kind of had to go through this process of like shedding and releasing, reprioritizing, getting realigned. Like, what am I here to do? And like, who am I going to let into my circles, into my life, into my business, into my home, into my energy? And what am I focused on? What am I doing and what am I building? So it felt like this like life crisis moment almost where I was just questioning everything. And there was so much like guilt and shame that I felt for like putting myself in this position to where I felt like I'd gotten so off track. But when I look back at this year and when I'm like in my prayer time, I just have like so much, I have nothing but gratitude for this year, because if I didn't reset that, if I didn't let go of those things, if I didn't move forward in the right direction on the right path, then I would be way further behind. It's like the more that we grow and the more that we create and build and do, I have to be in the right space, like mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It's like the ultimate responsibility of a leader. Like you have to be you have to take care of you and you have to be in a good place. You have to know where you're going and you have to know that you're leading people, whether that's your team or that's your community, like you're showing up for others. And it's not to say that you need to be perfect by any means, but it is a responsibility. And I really believe that the success of any company, like that is created by the person at the top. Like the culture is created from the top. And even though like I couldn't do what I do without you, the way that I lead and the way that I show up and what my motivations are, they absolutely matter for like the long-term trajectory of our company and the way that people feel when they experience our business. And so I was going through a lot of things internally, relationally, and I just felt like internally I was crumbling and I had to have some time to reset and to let go and to like find my confidence and find my power again. I felt like I reached this place where I just felt powerless, and there's a lot of layers there that maybe will shine through in season 2, but I had to like come back into my own and remember who I am and remember why I'm here and what I'm doing. So that was kind of my biggest thing.
And I feel like it's been so incredible to see it from the outside looking in, because there was like quite a good amount of time towards the start of this year, like the first half or whatever, where you were like, was not 100% yourself. And I could see that. And I was just like, it just requires a process and it takes time sometimes to like work through some things, let go of some things, and also get back to you and all of that. But now I feel like you've gotten more towards the other side, where I just feel like you've connected so much more with yourself again. And like, I even think moving to this new house has been such a good thing for you. Like you're surrounded by trees and you've always wanted trees, and you have deer here that you like feed in the backyard. And like, I just feel like you're finding so much joy again in just your life. And it's just so good to see. I love it. Oh.
I know, like you see me go through the worst of it, dude, the ringer. And it did feel like very symbolic when we moved to this new house in May. It felt like a crossing over. It felt like a new chapter. It felt like releasing things that weren't good for me. It felt like resetting and realigning and just finding myself again and finding joy again and finding peace in a way that I haven't felt in a while. Mm-hmm. So I think, when I look at and I reflect on my biggest takeaways from this year, one of the first things that comes to my mind is that what really makes a leader isn't how they show up when things are good and fun and amazing, but it's how they show up when things get really hard. Like, that's where you see what you're made of, you know? That's where you see who you really are. And man, that sounds exciting. It sounds like, that's great. But when you're actually living it out, it's really hard. And, you know, as a leader, you feel a lot of responsibility to your call and your mission and your vision, but to your people, whether it is your team or it is your community or your clients, like, other people are like betting on you and believing in you, and you have to have that belief in yourself. There were moments throughout this year where like I had to find some level of like optimism, and like I had to exercise my faith. That was probably one of the biggest themes of this year for me. It was like, I have to have faith in that which I cannot see. I don't feel peace right now, but like I know that peace is meant for me. I don't see the way forward now, but I know that clarity will come. I don't see how I'm possibly going to get over this or through this thing, but I know that like I was made for this. And I know that like I am here in divine timing, and like it is all going to happen for me. And it's showing up every day. And like for me, especially when we moved to this new house, like it just became ritual and routine. Like I'll wake up in the morning, I'll do my workout, and then I just kind of like walk around outside, like enjoying the trees and feeling like I'm a fairy in the forest, and I'm just praying and I'm declaring. In some moments or some mornings, I'm just complaining, and then I shift my posture, and then I declare what I believe and what I know and what I'm claiming. And like that has been a healing practice for me. And I feel like it's been crucial for my development as a leader as well.
Yeah.
Another big thing that I'm taking away from this year is just because things are hard, it doesn't mean that you're in the wrong place or it's wrong timing. I think that sometimes we can see things that are hard as a sign that like they aren't meant for us, or we're in the wrong place, you know, we're doing something wrong. But sometimes like the book, The Obstacle is the Way, I think by Ryan Holiday, like it's the truth. Like the obstacle, that which is hard, that which is tough, like it is the path forward, because it is the thing that is strengthening you, it's building you, it's increasing your resilience, and you need that for where you're going. Like I believe in my gut and my bones that like where we're going is going to demand something new from me and from you, just as every new season does. And like this year and this season of life was so necessary. Even though it was so hard at times and so painful, it was so necessary, because that is what's going to carry us through the next season.
Yeah, it's like all the things that you're going through right now, or that you've been through, it like leads you to the next thing, and it helps you grow. That's such a big thing that we've been talking about so much this year. But through all of the obstacles that you face, you grow stronger, and you also can grow in your skills. You know, I feel like I've grown in my skills with work stuff, but like the tough moments are what really helps you get to where you need to go, like the next phase, you know?
We don't want to hear that, because we just want to have the fun, exciting, amazing, victorious moments. But like you don't get there without some hardship. And I don't care what anyone has to say about it. That's just what I believe. Like you can't get to the mountaintop without hardship, without climbing, without falling or scraping your knee or running out of breath or sweating, right? And the same is true for business. And I think one of the biggest, if not the biggest takeaway for both of us this year is that developing you is the true key to success.
Yeah. Mind blown. I feel like that's something we've harped on quite a bit this year, but it's just so true. It's like developing yourself is the most important thing. And that we talked about it, I think, in our episode 10,000 Hours. Building your skill sets, like having skill sets, for example, that's more important than like having X amount of businesses or whatever, because like your businesses might not always last, but your skills take you to and from the next thing. So like developing yourself as a person on a personal level, but also in your skills, like that is such an important thing.
Yeah, I just feel like our space is so saturated with more and more information on trends and strategies and tactics. And don't get me wrong, there's a place for those things. I teach those things. I love strategizing with clients. I really do. But at the end of the day, like the thing that gets you to the place that you want to be, it's you. And like developing you, AKA growing in your skill sets or growing as a leader, focusing on you, building your creative muscles, whatever it is, like those are the things that carry you forward. Those are the things that sustain you. Those are the things that really matter. And I feel like we've talked so much this year through the podcast about the fact that you are literally the differentiator. You are the force, you are the answer, you are the power. And when you learn how to show up in the fullness of who you are, that feeling that you create and you evoke in others, it is unmatched. Like a woman that shows up fully as herself in her power with nothing holding her back, like there is something so infectious about that, something so freeing, liberating about that. And I think that element is going to really shine through our company next year. But you are the key, like you are the thing. And so developing you in whatever shape or form that you want, like that's always going to be the most important thing above all else.
Mm-hmm. Boom. Yeah, a few of my takeaways. I mean, I feel like that was a really big takeaway for the both of us. Like developing you is the most important thing, you know, but I was thinking about like some of my personal takeaways from this year and like some of what I've learned or whatnot. One of my biggest takeaways, and it's such a cliche, but it's like trust yourself. Because like I had talked about earlier, it was like I started to feel doubtful about certain things, like doubtful of my abilities, doubtful of my decisions and my choices and my, you know, pitching the podcast and all that. I was like definitely doubting myself at certain times. And I do remember you being like, just so trusting in me. There were so many times where I was like, I don't know about this, or like, I just felt doubtful. And you were like, no, like this is good. Like, let's go with this. And you just trusted me. And I literally saw that. And I was like, well, if she trusts me, then I should like just trust myself and trust my instincts and my intuition and, you know, those gut instincts and everything. But yeah, that was like a really big thing for me. And I feel like my takeaways kind of like build on each other because it was like number one is trust yourself. And then number two is like things take time. Again, such a cliche, but that's something that has been so important for me to remind myself of. Like I felt like, for example, with the podcast, I was like pitching it in February of this year. I was like, this is going to be the best thing ever. And I felt like by the end of this year, we were going to be like, like in such a different place with the podcast. I thought it was gonna be like massive growth and like tons of followers and tons of this. And my focus was so off. First off, I was looking at all the wrong things and really focusing on like the numbers too much in the beginning. But, you know, I was like, it's only been since February since we started this podcast. And I was just thinking about that in general with anything that we do in business. It requires a process and it takes time. And through all of that, you are developing you know, you're developing yourself and your skills and everything. And I feel like we're meant to be here right now, like where we're at on our journey. Like if we were further along on our journey, maybe we wouldn't be able to handle it if we were too far down the line. Like we said, your past experiences and the things that you've been through and the things that you've overcome, like that, all of that stuff just makes you stronger and it also just builds you. And I feel like I've just been really trying to accept that things take time. I'm like trying not to get too ahead of myself with certain things. And like with the podcast, for instance, I'm like, you know, I feel good about where we're at right now with that. I'm trying to just like be, I'm trying to put in my best effort with everything that I do and make excellent work. I mean, that's just what I'm always striving for, but I'm like, you know, it requires a process and it's not going to happen overnight. And some things don't even come to fruition within 1 year. 365 days is, I mean, I feel like if you don't understand it yet, time goes by so fast. And like 1 year is like a blip in time, really. And I do feel like I'm trying to trust myself in this process, in the fact that all of this stuff is taking time, because I think over the next like 5 to 10 years, like we will see a lot of things come to fruition that we're hoping and dreaming for, but I just have to like trust myself and trust the process and just accept the fact that it's going to take more time than I think it probably should.
Always.
Yeah, for real. And then the last one kind of like builds on top of that, but one big takeaway is just everything will work out the way that it's meant to. And all of my takeaways are, I feel like, such cliches.
No, they're good.
But yeah, I mean, I felt like that's something that's been really important to remind myself, is like, even if you make a quote unquote wrong move or you like go in the wrong direction, I do really feel like you will be redirected back to where you need to be. And like specifically with work stuff, I was just thinking about like, what if the podcast was like a bad decision or I made the wrong choice with this? Oh, well, like throughout this whole process of podcasting, we've learned a lot about podcasting. We've like had really great conversations, and I do feel like the podcast has been really good. Like I feel like people have been enjoying it, but like, even if it was the wrong move, we would eventually be redirected to where we need to be. And also throughout this whole experience, we've learned a lot. And that's the whole point, developing you, learning new things and trying new things, like not letting fear hold you back from just trying something new and different. And yeah, so I feel like all of mine like build upon each other, because it's like, first you have to trust yourself, and then you have to just trust the process and accept that things take time. But at the end of the day, I really do feel like everything will work out the way it's meant to, but like sometimes it's hard for me to remember that like things will work out the way that it's meant to, and we will be where we need to be when we need to be there, you know?
Yeah, we've talked about that on the podcast before too. It's like, I really just don't think that you can make a wrong move or a bad move. The things that you can look back on and think that was horrible, I just believe that it has a place in your journey. It's all going to work out for good. Like it is meant for your good. And even the things that were like the worst, I look back at my journey. I look back at like 2019 when I lost $20,000 and I thought it was the end of the world, but that was really the start of my career. You know, I look back at this year, one of the most painful things I went through. I don't see exactly how that's going to work in my favor yet, but I know that it will. And I know that everything's just making me stronger. And so, you know, we have to like hold back on the overthinking that we do, because that puts us in a place where we're just in our heads and we aren't taking action. Yeah. And so I think that's a really good takeaway. I think trusting yourself, like, there's a reason why things are cliches, because there's a lot of like power to them, by the way. But trusting yourself is so important, especially in business, especially when you're surrounded by so much noise. And I feel like you've done that like every step.
Yeah, I've been trying to. And I do feel like it is kind of like a practice. Like I was thinking about it on the way here, actually, when I was driving here. I was like, I don't feel like I will ever 100% just always trust myself and my decisions and everything. Doubt can creep in at any point of your journey, but I do think it's something that I'm just trying to practice more. And like going into the new year, I'm like just trusting that we're going to make the right moves and like, you know, we've got it. So just trying to like keep that optimism, because it's not always easy to be optimistic. And this year has definitely tested you in a lot of ways, and it's tested me in some different ways, but I do feel like we've both experienced our fair share of like doubt in different ways. But now we're getting towards the end of the year, and it's like, what was that all about? Like, let's not doubt ourselves and let's just trust ourselves. Like, we got this, you know?
What was that all about? Like, yes, that needs to be a part of our daily, what is that about? That's a part of the daily ritual and affirmations. Like, what in the world? No, it's so, so true. And I feel like this is just the most beautiful way that we can bring closure to season 1 of the Legacy Creator podcast. We just want to say thank you so much for being on this ride with us. You know, we feel like we just kind of threw ourselves into like deep water, and we tried to figure it out every step of the way. We still have the same setup in here. We've got pillows dispersed to help with the sound, so hopefully we'll improve that for season 2. But, you know, we just want to say thank you for being here and for sharing and for listening and for downloading and leaving reviews. Like, it really has meant so, so much. And I just believe that 2024, there's like something special on it, like for every single one of us, for those of you listening. And I just encourage you to like give yourself some space to reflect on your year, to think about like, what did I learn? How did I grow? Like, what were my biggest takeaways? I think this is always an important practice. We're so quick to jump to the next thing, like what is next, but really take some time, because all of this that we've talked through today, I know it's going to inform our next steps and how we show up for you guys. I just believe that next year is going to be expansive. There's going to be growth. There's going to be alignment. There's going to be like creative initiatives and endeavors like never before. I feel like people are really going to come into their power. So many good things coming, and we've got a lot of thoughts and ideas for season 2. But if you do have requests, anything that you'd love for us to speak on and talk about and shed some light on, let us know. And if you have enjoyed season 1, any episode, if you could share on Instagram, tag us at My Awakening Co. We would so appreciate it. And
here's to more in 2024.
All right, guys, we will catch you later. Bye.
Bye.
Here's to more in 2024.